Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this Planning Board meeting on May the 31st, 2022. I'd like to welcome my fellow councillors. We have Councillor Duran online, and Councillor Adams is unable to be with us. She's not within the province today, and the Deputy Mayor should be here shortly, McColeman. And we have our CAO, Rob Philpott, with us, and our Deputy CAO, I believe, is around the corner there. Yeah, Gordon McFarland. We have the engineer from Tech Services, Aaron McDonald, and Linda Stevenson from Tech Services. And good afternoon to all the viewers, as well as members of the media who will be watching. And Brian Harlick is on the left here with the controls. At this time in the agenda, I'll turn it over to Councillor McFeely, and he can get the approval of the agenda. The Chair of the Planning Board, the floor is yours, sir.
I thank you, Your Worship, and we will call the May 31st meeting of Planning Board to order and ask for a motion to approve the agenda. Moved by Councillor Ramsey and seconded by Your Worship that the agenda be approved as circulated. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Contrary? Motion carried. Item number 4 on the agenda has been deferred until tentatively June 7th. When, and that would be at 5 o'clock, June 7th?
CAO, it is June 7th. And
when would we be able to confirm that that is the actual date that would happen?
June 7th committee meeting, 5 o'clock.
That's the one for the halfway house, or what is it called?
Yeah, we're trying to set up a meeting with Atlantic Human Services, Inc. and police, just to have further discussions around the concept and what's envisioned for that particular service. We're hoping to have that meeting early next week, so at that time we should be in a position to confirm the date.
Sorry, I thought I had this off.
Okay, thank you, CAO. So
is that
presently it is tentatively scheduled for June 7th, so.
Is there time on that?
I think that's 5 p.m., eh? Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
for the people watching, they may
Yeah.
want to know.
5 p.m. on June 7th. Okay, we will deal with item number 3, 433, 437, and 447 Water Street Official Plan and Zoning Amendment. The purpose getting a lot of calls on a particular topic.
Yes.
So, anyways, supporting explanation. Purpose. The purpose of the zoning amendment is to allow row house townhouse development. The applicant is proposing a 10-unit row house / townhouse development. Row house means a building that is divided into 3 or more vertically adjacent joined dwelling units separated by a vertical wall, with each unit being constructed directly on grade. Row houses do not require individual public utilities for each unit, street frontage, and cannot be subdivided. Townhouse means a building that is divided into 3 or more vertically adjacent dwelling units separated by a vertical concrete or mason firewall, with each unit being constructed directly on grade. Townhouses require individual public utilities and street frontage for each dwelling unit and can be further subdivided as per section 8.15. Background. An application was received from Tyler McDonald, agent for property owner G. Morris Casely Limited, for PID number 301259, 433 and 434 Water Street, to amend the city official plan from commercial land use to residential land use, and to amend the zoning bylaw from neighborhood commercial C3 zone to high density residential R4 zone, and for PID number 301234, 447 Water Street, to amend the zoning bylaw from medium density R3 zone to high density residential R4 zone. A public meeting was held on May 24th, 2022, and council gave first reading on the same date. And the map there shows the subject properties. And there's also a diagram there showing the proposed site plan. Report under section 5.7 of the zoning bylaw. When planning board reviews the zoning bylaw amendment, it is considered the following general criteria as applicable. Under section 8.4 of the Parks and Green Space Plan, the criteria B, C, E, G, and H must be considered. A, conformity with all requirements of this bylaw. Staff comment, the proposed row house townhouse conforms with this bylaw. The development would have to comply with the R4 development standards for row house townhouses as noted below. R3 standards apply in the case of row house townhouse in the R4 zone, and the setbacks and frontages and so forth are listed there, and the townhouse and in the bottom two there. I don't think I need to read those into the record. They're there. B, conformity with the official plan. Staff comment, the rezoning of PID number 301234 conforms to the official plan as the property is designated as residential land use on the future land use plan. The official plan amendment for PID number 301259 has to consider section 5.2.2, location of high density housing. The amendments have no impact on parks and green space. So 5.2.2 in the official plan, location of high density housing. Council's intentions about locating high density housing are important to residents concerned with potential location of row houses and apartment buildings into the predominantly low density neighborhood. To help allay these concerns, Council lays out specific policies below on where they may allow future high density housing, some of which elaborate on their foregoing policies for special planning and development areas. Location areas. Council criteria for locating high density housing in the city of Summerside include, and the ones highlighted on the screen there are the ones pertinent to this, so I'll read those. The desirability of infilling properties which are already partly developed for higher density housing. The desirability of locating high density housing close to jobs, community facilities and services, and of promoting pedestrian access. And the last one, avoidance of negative economic and physical impact on surrounding land uses, whether existing or proposed. So the objectives in the official plan is to encourage high density housing in specific areas, and the policy statements relating to those that are pertinent to this particular project are: number one, promote high density housing in properties already partly developed for high density housing. And number 5, rezoning in areas presently designated for medium density R3 zone residential use. Number 6, areas immediately north of the downtown defined as Notre Dame Street to the north Granville Street to the east, Heather Moyse Drive to the south, and Duke Street to the west, subject to no harmful impacts on local heritage housing. And number 8, city arterial or collector roads as referenced in section 7.1 and figure 7-1. So 7-1, city arterials, Water Street East, South Drive, Water Street, and Heather Moyse Drive. C, suitability of the site for proposed development. Staff comment, this site is made up of 3 land parcels, approximately 0.66 acres in total, and is suitable for high density residential land use. Existing public street network and municipal services are available for the development. D, compatibility of the proposed development with surrounding land uses, including both existing and projected uses. Staff comment, the subject properties abut 2 land uses. The land use to the immediate south is conservation, boardwalk, and the land to the west, east, and south are residential. There are other commercial land uses nearby. The existing land uses of the subject property is a mix of residential and neighborhood commercial retail. There is an existing townhouse development, R4, to the west of the subject property. The rezoning from R3 to 4 would be compatible with the existing and proposed land uses, and the map is there showing the subject property. E, any comments from residents and interested persons? Staff comment. A public meeting was held on May 24th, 2022. The public meeting notice was advertised in the March 9th edition of The Guardian. 36 letters were mailed to 36 property owners. Tyler McDonald provided an overview of the intended 10-unit townhouse development intended to start construction this year. Bob Oulahan, 438 North Market Street, called the development officer on May 10th and requested clarity on the proposed development and setbacks from his rear yard property line. Carol Thompson, 451 Water Street, had questions regarding the amount of green space required for the development, net zero, garage, bin, storage, and fence between her property and the subject property. She requested clarity on townhouse versus row house. Terrence Payne, 249 Water Street, representing his parents, Jack and Heather Payne, had questions about the proximity of the development to their property. The relevant concerns raised by the public are addressed throughout this report. F, the adequacy of existing water, sewer, road, stormwater, and electrical services, city parking, and parkland for accommodating the development and any projected infrastructure requirements. Staff comment. The city's water supply and sewer treatment systems can handle the additional loading created by the change in zoning. Rezoning this development from R3 to R4 increases the loading on the lift station by less than 1% of the calculated future loading for the entire drainage basin. The city does not see this as a significant load change. Therefore, there is no expectation of the developer contributing to an upgrading of the new lift station, of a new lift station. Water Street has a 100mm distribution main on the north side of Water Street that can handle the water requirements for this change in zoning. The developer is responsible to have water service sized and connected to the city water distribution system. The city's sewer main infrastructure for this development is a 200mm gravity collection main on the north side of Water Street. The developer is responsible to have the sewer service sized and connected to the city's sewer collection system. All costs associated with this development into the city's infrastructure is a cost to the developer. This development fronts on Water Street, which is a city collector street built to city standards and runs east to west across the city. Although it is one of the larger volume streets, the volume on this section of Water Street is considered lower, 8,000 to 9,000 vehicles per day versus Water Street East with a volume of 18,000 to 20,000 vehicles per day. The proposed development parking and roof surfaces will accumulate storm drainage. There is an existing storm system fronting this property, which can be utilized to collect the drainage from the property. As per the site development and subdivision bylaw SS-19, the developer civil civil designer will need to develop a stormwater plan strategy to limit the flow of water from this site in a means so the site drainage does not overwhelm the existing city storm system. There is existing power on Water Street to service this development. The zoning bylaw requires 1 parking space per unit. The developer is proposing 2 spaces, 1 in garage and 1 in driveway. There is ample existing parkland nearby, Billy Bridges Park, 2.6 acres, located within 420 meters of the subject development. The Credit Union Place facility is located within 300 meters of the subject development. The city boardwalk located directly across the street from the subject development. All are accessible by street-walkway network. G, the impact of the development on pedestrian vehicle access and safety and on public safety generally. Staff comment, based on additional daily volume of approximately 40 vehicles per day, the new development will add approximately 0.2% additional traffic flow, additional traffic flow to Water Street. The total traffic volume of this development and existing development is approximately 35.2%. of the street's available capacity. See calculations attached to this report. There is a sidewalk located on the north side of Water Street to serve this development. The access and traffic flow within the development will be reviewed prior to development. H, compatibility of the development with environmental, scenic, and heritage resources. Staff comment, there are no compatibility issues regarding environmental, scenic, or heritage resources. I, impact on city's finances and budget. Staff comments, not applicable. And J, other matters as specified in this bylaw, nothing there. Other matters as considered relevant. Staff comment, the developer stated the development is not intended to be a net zero development, but will be equivalent to R2000 standards. Fencing between the residential properties is not required under the zoning bylaw. The developer will be required to consolidate 3 properties prior to development. To do so, the properties will be surveyed to determine the development boundaries. Mr. Payne's property has been previously surveyed, and the common boundary will be confirmed when Mr. McDonald has the survey carried out. The common boundary should be found to be the same. There is no specific green space area required for townhouses, as each unit is required to have a front and rear yard, and units have side yards as well, as noted in the R3 development standards in Section A of this report. Staff review. City staff supports the proposed official plan and zoning amendment from Tyler McDonald, agent for property owner G. Morris Casely, to rezone from R3 to R4. As per Section 5.10, subsection B3 of the zoning bylaw, the planning board shall make a recommendation to council on this application before it is approved or denied. The planning board recommendation, whether carried or defeated, will be brought forward to council for final decision. So the planning board recommendation, the application received from Tyler McDonald, agent for property owner G. Morris Casely Limited for PID number 301259, 433 and 437 Water Street, to amend the city official plan from commercial land use to residential land use, and to amend the zoning bylaw from neighborhood commercial C3 zone to high density residential R4 zone, and for PID number 301234, 447 Water Street, to amend the zoning bylaw from medium density R3 zone to high density residential R4 zone, be recommended to be approved by council. So we would ask for a mover and a seconder, and that moved by Councillor Ramsey, seconded by Mayor Stewart. And attached there is the traffic impacts on Water Street. I won't read those into the record. There's one correction there. Existing AADT, that should read Water Street traffic volume, not Tower Street traffic volume.
So this is to forward it to council for a vote on what date?
This will be going to council for a vote on the 7th.
So, okay.
So do we have any questions from council? Councilor Snow.
Thank you, Councilor McFeely. A couple questions. So this is in my ward, and have had discussions with some of the neighbors close to the property. So just some clarity, I guess. On here it says stormwater, so it does not overwhelm existing city storm system. I'm wondering, and just clarity, they also have to make sure they're not affecting neighboring properties, correct?
Yes, in general, it's to not impact neighboring properties, but if the general topography of the land goes in one direction, it's to continue there, but the storm system is along Water Street and now, so they should be able to connect to the existing storm system on Water Street.
So just for clarity, they should design it in a way that the storm water from their property will drain to the street frontage,
Or they'll bring a system into the
so that it won't. So, and I guess the reason why I'm asking, we know of several properties over the last 4 years that we've developed, and from there's been some either insinuation by the neighboring properties or others that stormwater is affecting their property. I would hope that a major development like this, and residents that have lived in the area for the majority of a very long time, don't get affected negatively by the development, so.
But the developer can go the other way. All the properties to the north are draining onto this property. And they can say, hey, don't let your water come onto my property, right? All the properties that are north of it or on North Market Street, the natural topography of the land is to drain towards Water Street. So this person's gonna have to allow to accept that on their land.
Right.
They're not gonna change the natural topography of the run of the land now, but they're gonna have to account for it.
Right,
There's
so.
been some challenges in the past over people arguing about what the natural flow of the water is now and asking someone to do something different. We're
No.
asking these people to connect into this storm system, and they are gonna have to accept the water to the north onto their property and bring it forward to water.
The developer is gonna have to.
Yes.
But he's not going to change it to a point where it then reverts and goes to, changes the topography. So it won't negatively affect, say, the ones to the north.
The ones to the north,
It warrants.
my understanding of it is that the properties to the north already drain onto this person's property.
Yeah.
Right,
So they're gonna have to account for that water, so
so what I'm saying is it won't revert and start negatively affecting the
well, I'm not
properties
gonna
to the
say
north.
that it's gonna negatively impact the people to the north without going and looking at the property, but right now, the general topography is the land runs from Notre Dame Street, Market Street, onto Water Street. So those properties now drain onto this property. This developer's being advised that you have to collect the water that drains onto your property and bring it out to an existing system on Water Street.
So it will not negatively impact the ones to the north. No, I'm being serious,
should.
it's,
Yeah.
it shouldn't, but it shouldn't and does is two different things, so if it's going to,
Yeah.
we need to make sure that it doesn't. Am I,
So it's the developer's responsibility to ensure that
It continues to run. north.
that water's going where it needs to
South.
go.
south, right.
So we have, you.
No, I have one more too.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, Counselor Snow?
The second one would be, it says in here that fencing between residential properties is not required under the zoning bylaw, but as a council, we can implement some requirements that way. And I guess the reason why I'm asking is the development, which looks to be a nice development, the design of it has rear parking for 10 properties, all vehicles coming into the back, which obviously will impact the neighbors significantly whenever people are coming and going, say at night and so on. So I think it would be a reasonable request to make sure that those cars coming into the property is now not affecting it negatively. And I'll reference another property that I'm currently working on that we rezoned, and now this exact thing is happening where cars are coming in, using it as a commercial business and affecting the neighbors that been there for many years. So I just think when we're developing properties like this, which looks like a great development, we need to really keep in mind how it might negatively impact the neighbors.
I'm not aware that we require any fencing between residential properties, and I'm not sure we have in our rules to be able to put that in as a clause, which we can expand on. And the other part is, sometimes there are issues if it's a commercial abutting a residential as a criteria. I think fencing is required in a commercial where it abuts a residential, but not a residential versus a residential.
Right.
So, I guess my concern is if it was a single house, I would understand, but where there is 10 apartments with everybody coming in and driving to the back of the
So,
property, I think there would be a requirement. That would be very similar to commercial building traffic.
It's, yeah, it's just not in our current rules and regulations.
I don't think the present bylaw provides for us to be able to put that restriction on it.
That's on my understanding as well.
Right.
It can be a request and has usually been accommodated anytime there's.
Between the developer and
Between the
the
developer.
neighboring
Yeah,
property.
but there's no, to my understanding, there's no rule in the bylaw that says.
That allows
"Oh, yeah,
us-
if you
allows
want
us
this
to say
approved,
you
have to
must
put a
do
fence
this."
in." That's not in there, I don't think.
I'm not aware either.
No, yeah.
I don't
Could I request maybe that staff reach out to the developer and have that discussion? I know he was here the other night, he seemed very workable to talk. I know Tyler, I know he'd be somewhat easy to get along with that way. I know he doesn't wanna be sat here and talk with neighbors, so I know these are the concerns that are being brought forward, and I think for future development, I think we need to look at these things, because that's the reason why people come and have so many complaints about possibly developing around their houses, because they know that they're gonna get some negative impact, and then after we'll say, well, sorry, there's nothing we can do about it, it's not in our bylaws, so it's just something we should be proactive and look at.
As was discussed, we don't feel it's in our regulations now. We can certainly have the conversation with the developer at the time of development to say, this issue has come up. If you're gonna be owning these properties, that's what's brought forward. But we don't have the mechanism to say that you have to, but we certainly can say there has been instances if you're gonna own the properties between neighbors and suggest that, but we don't have the means to make them do it.
So, you good? Okay, I think it was Councillor Campbell, then Councillor McDougall, then Deputy Mayor. Okay.
Mine was just a question. I know I've been asked 2 or 3 times from residents down there. Is there any plans for the city to bury that wiring? And there's quite an amount of
It's
wiring.
not just city wiring that's there. There's other infrastructure, communications, cable that are taking up, I'll say, a lot of the aerial space as well. So there's multiple parties that were on there. It was discussed back at the time of the infill being done in the boardwalk area, and it was 6 digits to put it underground, and that was through one party, so as well as our own. But it has been discussed previous years, and it's not been a current, currently yet. Yep. And I guess it was cosmetic and the price tag to do that. Yeah. It certainly was discussed. Yeah.
Councillor McDougall.
Yeah, just quickly, the difference between the R3 and the R4, if they were to keep these properties R3, they wouldn't have had to come in, right? Just to get a development. But I think there's one of them's commercial, isn't it, or?
Two of them are C3, and
Right.
so they would have had to change zoning to be able to allow the row houses.
Right,
One property, the one closest to North Market, or sorry,
Yeah.
Northumberland Street was R3. But the reason why he had to go to R4 was he wants 10 units, and you can only have up to 8
Yeah.
as a discretionary use in the R3.
okay. Yeah, that was my thought. But if he was to leave it at R3, they'd just be able to have 8 units, right? But they wouldn't have had to go through this process?
They would have had to go through a discretionary use process, which is
Yeah,
basically the
right.
same thing.
Okay, thanks.
Councillor Snow.
Sorry, Bruce's good question made me have another question. So, in hypothetical, we change it to R4, and he decides he doesn't go ahead with the 10-unit plan. Next year he comes back with a plan to build a apartment building. What happens?
He would have to meet the standards of the R4 zone.
So he could build an apartment building?
Yep.
So,
That's an allowable use in R4.
okay, so is there anything in our bylaws that would allow us to make sure that he builds what is being presented as opposed to what could be?
We can't hold them to a specific plan
So,
under the R4 zone.
so we should be asking the question, would we be okay with a big apartment building being built there?
I don't know how big of an apartment building you get there. It's only a .66 acre lot. I wouldn't say a big building, but it could be an apartment building.
Do we know how big we could?
Once it's rezoned R4, but
I guess, so, okay, let's look at the other way. Could we leave it R3 and give them a variance to have 10 units?
No, the process we maxed out there, and I think it happened or evolved when we had the last unit probably 10 years ago, is they set a number and said, okay, it was 6 and it went to 8. They said, okay, where are we stopping it? It went to 8. this guy's looking for 10, and that's why it moved into the R4 category. Once you're beyond 8, it was considered a higher density, not just, it was 4, 6, 8. It's still coming into that lower range. They drew a line and says, once you go beyond 8, you are getting into a type of an apartment building. They just happen to be subdivided and allow them to sell them off or continue to rent them. So it is really a 10-unit building that's going on there. You know, like how they choose to divide it and build it, individual units, side by side, versus over and under, and, yeah.
Yeah, I agree, but I think there would be a differing of opinion, maybe even amongst council and definitely residents in the area if it was an apartment building or row houses that are similar to what's already developed down the road. I think there's just a difference of that area and what.
And that's the comment that we bring up, and we say, don't get tied to a plan when you're looking at a land use. They may well have full intentions, and that's what they do, but when the land use that's approved is the land use, not exactly that plan that's presented. But we want to see a plan to give us a general idea. That's not what's being approved. You know, that's their intentions, their full intentions, and they're working towards it. But 5 years' time, things change, and somebody owns a piece of land, and we can't be getting tied to a plan. It's great to get the visual help to see what it look like and consider it, but that's not when everything gets approved.
I guess I think as a council, we need and should look at ways that we could, currently we can't, but ways we can avoid that type of thing. Like I'm thinking of Fox land that came up a couple of years ago that all of a sudden, residents in Councillor Campbell's ward were like, what's going on here? We didn't, do you know what I mean? And things happen.
Well,
and then
in that case, the land was already zoned R4.
No, I know
Yeah.
that, but I
Yeah.
mean, people, like, you just don't, to rezone something and sit on it, I really don't like the speculation part of it, or, you know, you come in with a plan and then all of a sudden that plan changes. That sort of bothers me and puts council in a really tough position when we look at what is being proposed, which, you know, I can see fitting there, but I can't see a multi-unit apartment building fitting there in the same way, so.
Effectively, they've making it look like that, but we've got a 10-unit apartment building. If they don't sell them and they're all one building and one service, it'll be a row house and never be subdivided.
Right.
So the choice will be he's having 10 units instead of having people with a typical 12-unit building, 4 and 3 high. I've decided to make them 10 side. Everybody only has one neighbor. And
No,
nobody
I realize that, but I do believe there's a difference between the two.
there is, yeah, but the density as far as the amount of people that are on there and the number of cars and lots and number of units, because they're only going to be allowed a certain square footage, which is why she's referring back to they have to build it to the R4 standard.
Okay, planning board, any other questions or concern? Are you ready for the question? Ready for the question? So it's been moved by, and I'll read back into the record here just so that we're clear. Planning board recommendation, the application received from Tyler McDonald, agent for property owner G. Morris Casely Limited for PID number 301259, 433 and 437 Water Street to amend the city official plan from commercial land use to residential land use and to amend the zoning bylaw from neighborhood commercial C3 zone to high density residential R4 zone, and for PID number 301234447 Water Street to amend the zoning bylaw from medium density R3 zone to high density residential R4 zone, be recommended to be approved by council. And that was moved by Councillor Ramsey and seconded by Mayor Stewart. All those in favor say aye.
Aye, this is to get it to go for the vote.
Yeah. And contrary, passed unanimously, so this will go to council for a vote of all council on a special meeting on June 7th. Our final item on the agenda today is a mobile sales establishment, application from Todd McKinnon. The supporting explanation, purpose, the city has received an application from Todd McKinnon to operate and allow a mobile sales establishment, Hostas Fish and Chips Express, to operate at 245 Heather Moyse Drive, Harbor Quay site, weather permitting. The proposed hours of operation 11 a.m. to 9 p.m. Monday through Sunday. Background, this will be Todd McKinnon's first year operating in the city. However, he has worked with Colin McKinnon, who operated in the city for 7 years. The location being proposed is owned by the Summerside Port Corporation, Inc. And the land, I think everybody's familiar with the space down there by Harbor Quay. So a mobile sales establishment means a business located in a motorized vehicle or movable structure that is towed or moved by a motorized vehicle, and where all goods, wares, and foodstuff that are offered for sale are contained entirely within the motorized vehicle or movable structure, but does not include a lunch truck. So the report under the section 13, City of Summerside Licensing Bylaw CS-21, the bylaw states the following. 13, mobile sales establishment license. A, any person or company seeking a license to operate a mobile sales establishment in the city shall make application therefore to the council. B, licenses may be granted for a mobile sales establishment to conduct business on a maximum of 2 locations in the city, and each application shall be accompanied by a letter of permission from the owner or owners of the property in which the mobile sales establishment will be located. Council shall allow or refuse the application based upon consideration of safety, desirability, impact on established business in the city, public convenience, and such other considerations as it deems appropriate. D, council may attach terms and conditions to the approval of the license if granted, including but not limited to hours of operation, health code requirements, litter control, approved locations. E, the license for a mobile sales establishment shall be valid for the calendar year in which the application is made only. A new application is required to council for each calendar year. F, no appeal shall lie from a decision of council respecting a mobile sales establishment license. So staff comment, Mr. McKinnon will provide written permission from the Summerside Corp. Inc. prior to his licensing being issued. Staff review, city staff support the application received from Todd McKinnon to operate a mobile sales establishment, Haas's Fish and Chips Express, at 245 Heather Moyse Drive, property owned by the Summerside Port Corporation, Inc. As per section 5.10, subsection B3 of the zoning bylaw, the planning board shall make a recommendation to council on this application before it is approved or denied. The planning board recommendation, whether carried or defeated, will be brought forward to council for a final decision. So the planning board recommendation, the application received from Todd McKinnon to operate a mobile sales establishment, Haas's Fish and Chips Express, at 245 Heather Moyse Drive on property owned by the Summerside Port Authority, Inc., be recommended to be approved by council. And we would seek a mover and a seconder for that. Moved by Mayor Stewart, seconded by Councillor Ramsey.
Thanks the question here for you, Mr. Chairman.
Councillor McDougall.
Yeah, just for clarity. So does Mr. McKinnon have to be inspected by the health department before the license is official, or can they just start once we get it rezoned? When do they have to have a license, or do they have to have a license from the health department to serve food?
Our understanding is they have to have a food premise license, and in order for them to get a food premise license, they need a letter of support from the city.
Wouldn't
So-
you think that would be the other way around? Like, I have no problem giving this if we had a letter from the Department of Health saying they're capable. And I'm not just talking about this one. I'm just talking about food trucks in general. You would think that they should be certified by the health department before we give them approval to go. So if we've given them approval, they need to be licensed by the health department?
The department, I'm not sure
Right.
what department exactly it's under, Department of Health, but the food premise license is not issued without a letter of support from the city, and we can't provide that letter of support unless you folks make a decision on it.
Yeah, okay. I guess it's backwards, but that's the way it is. So who's to say that once they get the approval here, how do we know when it's approved by the health department?
We don't.
That's good.
Do we send a list of who we have approved
We,
to the health department?
we had, just recently, actually, the health department has reached out to us and said, at one time, we would give them their license, and we would notify the owner in their letter, or the applicant in their letter, that they required a food premise license. They are aware of that in their approval letter from the city, that they have to acquire that license. But if they don't, I mean, we don't know about it, but we have in.
So are we setting ourselves up if there's something, a health scare or something like that? I just,
Should we not?
But
if
they're,
we-
they're a whole separate entity that we're providing a license. The province has all the set of rules. If someone is an infraction on there, we don't take any part in those rules. We're not aware of the rules. We don't enforce them. And if they're there to enforce their own regulations, so we just say, here's our land use stuff. Great, if there's issues there, they can deal with them. We don't get involved. We don't know the details, whether the,
so,
you know.
so do we notify the health department that, we'll just take this one from Todd, when this goes through for approval, whatever date, do we notify the health department that we've given Todd a license?
Currently,
So-
no.
Okay, I think that needs to happen. Just to save our own skins, so, that's all I'll say, thanks.
Can I ask a question?
I guess just to add on to Bruce,
Justin, do you have a comment there?
Yeah, it's just I wanted to know, unless I'm missing something, how come this hasn't been asked before? Like we've approved countless mobile food vendors, and this is the first time we're asking about.
Certainly my time, my recollection, there's never been the issue. They've all gotten the license that they need. The province will shut them down pretty darn quickly if they don't have their license and don't meet the requirements of the health code. In fact, they're much more vigilant on that now than they were even a year ago. So,
Just to Justin's question, the only reason I asked it because I thought it was the opposite way around. I always thought that they had to be inspected before they came to us, you would think, but anyway.
Councillor Snow?
yeah, I was just adding on to Bruce's comment that I think it would be in our city and our residents' best interest that any business, food truck, and it's not, that has nothing to do with Todd, we gotta be sure with that, make sure we're clear with that, but it's just when Bruce asked that question, I think it's something we should be doing to, again, be proactive. We send an email saying, so-and-so has just received a license to operate in our city of food mobile establishment, and it would literally take a couple seconds, and it would ensure that we're.
And I guess the same would apply though, if they got a liquor license, or if someone has a restaurant. They all fall under different health regulations that we don't advise, saying, oh, by the way, this business started up here, and this business started up here. There's a food truck part that we're talking about now, which some may feel are more subject to short-term, but we don't do it for if you open up a restaurant tomorrow. We don't open up and say, oh, by the way, Department of Health, Council Snow opened up a restaurant at such and such location. That doesn't happen either. Like, there's separate agencies that are looking after, I don't know what processes they have to go through to get their licensing, their occupancy, and all the other things, as far as their liquor license, food, and all those checkoffs they gotta get for making sure they have the proper kitchens and all that stuff. There's a whole separate.
Process
It
that
would
they
expand
need.
beyond just the food trucks, there's a whole bunch of other entities that they being Department of Health or food inspection, whatever they do, come into town to review.
Justin, did you have another point or comment or question?
No, I guess not. I guess I just wanted clarification because we've had a couple of these come in already, and it usually just goes right to a no problem. Why is it even coming to us in some cases? So I was just kind of wondering why the question was raised just kind of spontaneously at this one about the provincial side of things. I didn't know, maybe if I just not being there, I might have missed something.
And Councillor Drawn, I guess the other one is, this one, I guess our new direction we've gotten is to process these ones if there's nothing new. And this one here is a similar location, but it's a different owner. So that's the only reason why it would have been brought forward today is we have gotten direction to process these without going through this process. And in this case, it's a different owner, a new person doing it, so it's here before you today.
Yeah, no, totally understand. And I know even before we directed staff to kind of do some of the repetitive ones without us, there was a couple before that came in for this year that, you know, it was so-and-so and they're going here, and it was always no problem. So again, I was just kind of wondering why the question was raised just today about the provincial, and I've never heard that in 3 or 4 years that we've been doing this. It's just a question that I haven't heard before. I'm just wondering why now.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor.
I certainly respect Councillor Dwyron's question. I can remember even back last year when we would ask if there was a new application coming in or whatnot. What I was told at that time is if it's an application, we do the technical side of things on the application, but then the person has that onus on them and the responsibility that they have to get that through the province for health and safety reasons. So I guess that's maybe why you're asking, and that's what I thought we would do with the application. Whoops. To the province, or the province has to speak to the owner.
Okay, I see no further lights on here, so Planning Board, if you're ready for the question.
This goes again to vote?
This will go to council on the special meeting on the 7th
For council vote.
of June, for a full council vote, So the recommendation, the application received from Todd McKinnon to operate a mobile sales establishment, Hoss and Fish and Chips Express at 245 Heather Moyse Drive, property owned by the Summerside Port Authority, Inc., be recommended to be approved by council, and that was moved by Mayor Stewart and seconded by Councillor Ramsey. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Contrary? Motion carried, and that concludes the agenda for Planning Board meeting of May 31st, Your Worship.
Thank you. Okay, I guess if we'll have a motion to adjourn, but we'll, is there a motion to adjourn? All in favor say aye. So we'll give Brian Harlick a few seconds here.